Good afternoon again, everybody. Your esteemed host and colleague, Peete, is back with another amazing and fantastic video for this fine Monday. So all year, one of the most common comments that I get, both here on YouTube and on Twitter and stuff, is can you put out your top 10 or your top 25 teams every week? And, you know, I've been very vocal about the way I feel about the AP poll or even anybody's individual polls. I'm not coming down and saying that these people on YouTube or on TV, whether it's Joel Klatt or Paul Feinbaum or even some of these guys on YouTube like Mark Rogers that make their weekly polls. Now, I actually do really enjoy to watch Mark Rogers' top 10 or top 25 or whatever that really makes sense. It's entertaining. And the other thing I get all the time, I mean, this is all day, every day, since the beginning of the season, is my thoughts on the AP poll rankings. I've been very, very clear about the AP poll rankings. I pay little to no attention to them whatsoever. But I did say I will not make a top 10 or a top 25 list until the week before the college football playoff rankings, the only rankings that matter in college football, come out. Well, they come out next week. So here I am. Now, what I'm going to do here, though, is I'm not going to make my top 10. Now, they're going to do the top 25. I'm not going to go through 25 teams. I'm going to do top 10, okay? But this is not according to me. What I'm trying to do, just to be a little bit different than what everybody else is doing, everyone wants to give their opinion on who's in the top 10. I'm going to give you my best projection based on what I think I know about the way the College Football Playoff Committee views things and try to predict what their rankings are going to be in the very first ranking show. Now, there's a caveat to this. This is provided that all of these teams, because I don't think the rankings come out until, it's either a Sunday, I think it is. I think it's Sunday. So all these teams have to play on Saturday, or most of them do, unless they have a bye. This is provided that all of these teams that I have projected in this top 10 win this week. Obviously, if any of these teams lose, they're going to probably fall out of the top 10 or fall drastically from what spot that I predict them to be in. So what have we learned from the College Football Playoff Committee in the first 5 years? Well, we've learned that they piss a lot of people off. But what they value, at least as far as I can tell, is they value, first of all, record. That's first and foremost. I mean, if you're a one-loss team versus an undefeated team, you're probably not going to be ranked as high as that team, unless it's some very extenuating circumstances. They also value how you win against the opponent that you're beating. They also value your strength of record, right? Strength of schedule is something completely different than strength of record. Your strength of schedule is an entire season. The strength of record is what have you done against who to this point. They always say, and you can take this with a grain of salt, whether or not you believe them or not. They always say, we don't ever project ahead. We don't rank people or teams based on who they're going to play in the future. We only rank them on what they've done till this point. They also say that they pay no attention to coaches' polls or AP polls, which is the reason I say that the AP poll is completely meaningless and does not matter. So here we go. I'm going to give you my top 10 where I think, this is not my opinion. So for anybody who's going to get on here and say, you shouldn't have this team ranked there, that's crazy, that's idiotic. This is not my opinion. I would probably have these teams that I'm about to list in the top 10 differently placed than where I think they're going to be placed. So this is completely a projection and trying to figure out the way the playoff committee thinks. I think it's fun to do that. And we'll see how wrong I am. And I'll give you the reasons why I think they're going to place these teams in this place. Now, do I think I'm going to get 100% of these right? Probably not. But I did a video similar to this last year where I tried to predict the way they were going to do this top 10. And I think I only got one of them wrong that first week. So we'll see if I can be perfect this week, or maybe we'll see how bad I am. I don't know. Anyway, First and foremost, the first thing you're going to notice, I'm going to start with 10 and go down to 1. I think the committee is going to leave Georgia out of the top 10. Now, maybe they won't. I don't know. Do I think that Georgia is a top 10 football team in America? Yes, I do. But based on some of these other teams, and based on the fact that Georgia lost at home to South Carolina, it's not really so much about Georgia as it is what these other teams have done and their resumes. That's the first and foremost. So I think that Georgia will probably come in at number 11, but this is a top 10 list. I think they're going to have, at number 10, I think they're going to have Oregon. Well, people would say to me, how would they put Oregon ahead of Georgia? It's simple. They both have one loss. Oregon's was on a neutral field against another top 10 team, and Auburn, and they really were winning that game with 10 seconds left and lost at the last second. Georgia, on the other hand, lost at home to an unranked South Carolina in an overtime game. That's the reason I think Oregon will be ahead of Georgia. So 10, I think they're going to have Oregon. Number 9, I think they're going to have Auburn. Another one-loss team with a very good loss on the road at Florida. The reason I have Auburn ahead of Oregon is Auburn beat Oregon. So it's pretty much as simple as that, and I think that they value head-to-head when it comes to a tiebreaker. Now, if it were me making this list, I'd probably have it switched. I'd probably have Auburn at 10 and Oregon at 9. Even though Auburn beat Oregon, I understand that. But you're splitting hairs at that point, okay? And listen, quite frankly, Oregon's loss against Auburn was a lot closer than Florida's win over Auburn, if that makes sense. All right, so 10 Oregon, 9 Auburn. 8, I have Notre Dame. Now, the reason I think they're going to have Notre Dame ahead of both of these teams is because they went on the road and lost to a top 11, 10 or 11 team. At the time, they were a top 5 team in Georgia. I also think that they're going to value some of these big wins over other ranked teams. Now, they beat Virginia. When Virginia was still ranked, they beat Virginia handily at home. They waxed Southern Cal. I know Southern Cal's not that great. But I think that they're going – I think they're just going to value Notre Dame's loss against Georgia higher than some of the other losses. Okay. Number 7, I think they're going to have Florida. Florida's only loss is on the road and a very tough place to play in Baton Rouge against LSU, and we all know what LSU is this year. I'd say that out of all of these teams that do have a loss, Florida has the best loss. And so I think they'll be number 7. And I've been wrong about Florida all year. Now, 2 weeks ago, I changed my mind about Florida. They're definitely a top 10 team, and they're capable of beating anybody on any given day. Now, I don't think they're the best team in the country. I don't think they're the third best team in the country, but they're a very good team. Number 6, I think they'll have Penn State. Penn State's undefeated. Now, Penn State had a convincing win over Michigan. I know Michigan tried to make a comeback there at the end of that game, but Penn State looks like a complete football team. The defense might be the best defense that James Franklin has had since he's took over that job. The quarterback is coming into his own. He's starting to look a lot more like Trace McSorley. They've had some very dominant wins against good teams. Now, they did have one minor slip-up, a very, very close win against Pitt. But we now know that Pitt is not a terrible team. So I think that I think they'll have Penn State at number 6. Number 5, I think they'll have Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma has been dominating everybody that they play. Jalen Hurts looks like, he's right up there in the Heisman conversation with a couple of other guys. Jonathan Taylor, obviously Joe Burrow, even Tua, you can throw in that category. But anyways, Oklahoma's the reason I don't think they'll be in the top 4 is based on the defenses that they played against. Now, listen, I'll tell you this much. I've said over and over and over again, I've caught hell from Oklahoma fans. A lot of them have just completely retreated from the YouTube channel. There's maybe a few left that watch me and respect my opinion. I don't hate Oklahoma at all. I think Oklahoma's got probably the best offensive head coach in America in Lincoln Riley. Their offensive talent is off the charts. I have been extremely critical, as everybody has that's been watching football over the past few years, about their defense. Last year in particular, maybe the worst defense in the FBS. Oklahoma, offense this year is as good as it's been when Baker Mayfield was there. It's as good as it was when Kyler Murray was there. They're not skipping a beat. The defense for Oklahoma this year is 10 times better than it was last year. Now, if you're an Oklahoma fan, you've got to be extremely excited about this because they should have fired Stoops a long time ago, and now you'd be in a much better position than you are now. But anyway, it doesn't matter. You fired him finally. Somebody finally got a clue over there, and they fired him. In Oklahoma, I've always said, if Oklahoma even had a top 30 defense in America, top 40 defense in America, as opposed to, in the hundreds, they'd be almost unstoppable. And they're on the way to doing that. So this is a team that's very dangerous. There's nobody, including Clemson, and I'm a Clemson homer. There's nobody, whether you're Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, Clemson, anybody that wants to see Oklahoma in the playoffs. Nobody. If this offense stays healthy and the defense continues to improve. And Oklahoma has every opportunity to probably move themselves up into the top 4 very easily because some of these teams in the top are going to play each other. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Number 4, I think they'll have Clemson at number 4. A lot of this, if you really look at this list by the time it's done, it's very similar to the AP poll. I think there's maybe 3 teams that are in different positions than the AP has them right now. But I think they're going to have Clemson at number 4, mainly and only because of the close win against North Carolina. Every other team they've dominated. It's easy to point at the interceptions that Trevor Lawrence has thrown, but if they do all these analytics and they sit in this room, these committee people, and they look at all the analytics. They look at offensive stats, defensive stats, turnover margin. Was it on the road? How many did you win by? Blah blah blah. And in all of those categories, Clemson's team this year is the same as it was last year. In some cases, better. The people that are saying that Clemson's offense has not looked good this year are wrong. The quarterback has not lived up to the expectations, but the quarterback's only one player. The offense in general is still averaging well over 500 yards a game, 35 points per game. The defense statistically, after losing all 4 defensive linemen to the NFL, is playing lights out. Not to mention the linebacker play is even better, and the secondary might be the best secondary that Clemson's had. Maybe in Dabo Swinney's tenure, certainly in this playoff era. So they'll value the stats for Clemson, and they'll value the wins, the dominating wins over lesser opponents. They'll punish them for the 1-point win against North Carolina, and that's why they'll be at 4 instead of 3, 2, or 1. Number 3. Every poll in America, well, the AP poll anyway, right now has Alabama as number 1. They've stayed at number 1 for a while. I think they're going to be number 3. I think they're going to say Alabama to this point, okay? I'm not saying the rest of the season because they don't project ahead, remember? They're going to say to this point, Alabama's schedule and Clemson's schedule are eerily similar. Eerily similar. They play basically the same type of opponents, and they even have one common opponent who both got dominated. So Clemson dominated A&M, Alabama dominated A&M. The only difference is between Clemson and Alabama is that Alabama has not had a 1-point victory, a close game against an unranked team. So that's the difference. That's the reason that you have Clemson at 4 and 3 Alabama. Now, again, this is not my opinion. This is my projection of what they'll do. If it were me, I'd have Alabama and Clemson both ranked higher than 4 or 3. Just to put that out there. Number 2, I think they'll have Ohio State at number 2. Anybody who's watched Ohio State play football for the first 8 weeks of football knows that this is an elite football team on both sides of the football. They've got NFL talent across the board. They got maybe the best defensive end in the country, and they've got a Heisman candidate, Justin Fields, playing lights out at quarterback. They got J.K. Dobbins, who's, destroying people. Ohio State's a real threat to anybody. If it were me, and this is just me, again, I probably would have Ohio State at number 1, just based on what I've seen. But the team that I think they're going to have at number 1 is LSU. And the reason I think they're going to have LSU ahead of Ohio State is strictly resume. That's it. They've got better wins against better teams. Now, would this not be an interesting game to watch in the postseason, right? Ohio State versus LSU. I'd love to see that. Two high-flying offenses. The difference here, I think, is the fact that LSU's defense is not as good as Ohio State's. But that win against Texas for LSU early in the season does not look as good as it did before. Texas has really kind of been disappointing this year. I'm not saying Texas is not a good team. They are. But they're not, the expectation was for Texas to be a top 5, top 6 team throughout the entire season, and they're just not living up to that. So I think they'll have LSU at number 1, and they probably should. And that's it. So we'll see if I'm right. Everybody will mark this down. And even though I said 4 or 5 times throughout the duration of this video that this is not my opinion, this is my projection of what they will do, there will still, without a doubt, a shadow of a doubt, be people commenting in the comment section telling me I'm an idiot about my opinion. It's not my opinion. It's a projection. It's a guess of what they'll do. And it's fun for me to do this. I want to see how close I can get to how they think, because that's the real criticism of the playoff committee in the first place, right? Everyone's trying to say, well, that they're inconsistent. We don't understand exactly the way that they think and the way that they're, they'll value one thing more than another one week and vice versa the next week. So it's fun for me to try to project. We'll see how close I am. Just to recap, very quickly recap before I get off here. I think that they'll have Oregon 10, Auburn 9, Notre Dame 8, Florida 7, Penn State 6, Oklahoma 5, Clemson 4, Alabama 3, Ohio State 2, and LSU 1. Provided that none of those teams that I just mentioned lose this Saturday. If one of them loses, it's going to screw the whole thing up. I have to make another video. All right, guys, tell me where I'm right, where I'm wrong, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day. Pigskin Pete is checking out.